All right. Hello, I'm George Kilpatrick, host of Inspiration for the Nation. Welcome to our conversation. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and a new survey has found that the COVID-19 pandemic is having a bigger impact on the mental health and general health of American men than many admit. As part of Mental Health Awareness Month, today's program will shed light on the subject and will help you understand some of the reasons why men won't admit that they have some issues sometimes, and also provide some remedies. We'll have a keynote address by Dr. Lawrence Jackson, and here's some of the nation's top motivational speakers and mental health professionals, including Chris Marvel, Adrian Hargrove, Brad Butler II, and Dr. Brandon Holly. Tonight, our focus will be particularly on the mental health and impact on Black and Brown boys. The program was developed by the My Brother's Keepers Fellows, who will share their findings and their own journey. We'll meet two of them tonight. But first, let's learn a little bit more about the My Brother's Keepers program in Syracuse with Building Men Program Executive Director, Joe Horan. Joe?
Oh, thanks for having me, George. Very excited about tonight. Very excited. The New York State My Brother's Keeper initiative seeks to change the narrative, right, of boys and young men of color and all students by closing and eliminating that opportunity gaps that they face and help them reach their full potential. We want these guys to succeed and grow and grow. And the My Brother's Keeper Fellows, they're young men that just needed that little extra leadership. And they have this program that helps them in public speaking. They have mentors, right? They do mastermind book clubs, they read articles, they write their college essays, and they visit colleges and they do some leadership training. And today is the culminating event. These guys have been working on this since December on how to engage our community in conversations about mental health. So they're sharing their stories. We got great lineup of speakers and guest panelists. So I'm very excited today.
Great, Joe. Thank you so much. We're really looking forward to a great program this evening. As a matter of fact, let's meet one of the fellows right now. Here's Omar. We're now joined by Omar Hussein. He is a senior at Nottingham High School, and he's a part of the Building Men, My Brother's Keeper program, both end, right? And so, Omar, about 2 years ago, I was not at the Building Men annual breakfast, but I understand that at the end of the breakfast, you came up and told your story, told your truth, and your brothers came up and supported you.
Yes.
Because it was about your own journey through this idea of masculinity and expectations. So what did you say during that time, during the Building Men breakfast, and what did you want people to know about your journey?
Well, during that time, I told the story about how I got to the Building Men and how I was before. And it went like, before I joined Building Men, I went to Dr. King. It was a pre-K through 5th grade elementary school. And while I was there, I was a troubled child and I really didn't have much friends. And like, it was pretty hard going there because I really didn't understand what I was and like where I was in that situation, because I really didn't understand that I didn't have any friends. All the people that I thought were my friends weren't actually friends. But as soon as there was this life-changing event that happened where I got into this fight with with a girl, and I caused her to go unconscious, and it really changed me a lot to the point where I stopped fighting as much. And right after that, it was like right after I finished my fifth grade year, and right after that I was going into H.W. Smith for school, and that's where I met Mr. Haran and the Building Men Club. And it's after that my life has changed dramatically. I've made friends, I've made brothers that love me dearly, and the loyalty is just immeasurable.
Mm. And when you say that, you know, you had this fight, and what was it in your mind? Was it that you thought that you had to do that? Were you trying to prove something? What was going through your mind?
In my mind at the time, I thought I had to do that. I wasn't really the type to walk away from a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
I would just go in head on without thinking, think and then ask questions. I mean, do and then ask questions later. That's what I would do.
Your presentation is about mental health and the pressures for men and boys to be tough and appear tough, and the toll that that takes on them. What can you say about your own experience with those very issues, and how, for example, being a part of Building Men has changed that for you?
Well, my experience with that is I had really bad anger problems, and come to a, I wouldn't acknowledge those problems until like after I would get into a fight with this girl. And after I joined the Building Men program, that's when I actually decided to get help
Mm.
from Mr. Haran, from my brothers. And that's when I actually started to change as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And the person I am now is totally different from the person I was back then.
When you think about it, Omar, when you think about other young men, other boys who might be having the same issues that you might have been going through, and they don't feel like they have a place to turn, what do you say to them?
I would say think before you do. Get help if you need to. Matter of fact, not even if you need to, get help before you do something that you would regret for the rest of your life. Because
E-
this
mhm.
is the something that I take with me for the rest of my life. And I have a nephew. He has anger problems too, and I'm trying to help him through that. I'm trying to get him to understand, to come to us as his uncles and aunts to help him out cope through those anger problems, to talk to people.
What do you say to those that say, "Oh, but that's soft and that's not being tough and that's not being macho"? Um, how did you get through that stigma, quote unquote, of appearing to be soft, if you will?
Well, I used to live in a neighborhood where you would have to be pretty strong.
You had to put on the mask, right? You had to, yeah, yeah, yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
after I moved out of that neighborhood, I got a lot closer to my siblings, and the love from my siblings is just it's really crazy. It's they let me know that they let me know to put my guard down, to always be sensitive whenever you need to. Crying is not a sign of weakness. That's what I learned. It's a sign of being strong for way too long.
Omar Hussein. Omar Hussein is a senior at Nottingham High School. And because of this work, I understand that you now want to uh, pursue mental health therapy as a career.
Yes, yes, I want to get into therapy because there's a lot, a lot of young men and young women out there that have problems coping with mental health issues, but they don't know how to bring it to their families. They're afraid that they're going to be considered crazy if they do bring it to their families, or they're afraid that their families won't might not believe them.
Well, that's why we need more people like you who not only want to help the community, but you're also in the process someone who has been able to help themselves with the support and the love of your brothers in Building Men. And of course, by extension, my brother's keeper. Omar Hussein is a senior at Nottingham High School. And you've been in Building Men program for what, 6 years?
7.
7 years. 7 years in the Building Men program. So, from what you speak. Good luck to you. And of course, we'll be hearing more. Obviously, we've got a presentation, the very thing that you're talking about, a presentation on mental health just ahead.
Thank you for having me.
And you're welcome. That's Omar Hasim once again. And we really, really appreciate his willingness to share his journey, and of course, for being an example. And with our mental health therapist on the line today, that's a young brother that y'all need to mentor. So holler at him so he can get some support. Well, now it's time to meet our keynote speaker. And by the way, stick around because we'll have a panel to answer some of the questions that the young men have prepared for you tonight. But let's meet Dr. Lawrence Jackson, shall we? Dr. Lawrence Jackson is an assistant professor of couple and family therapy at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. His areas of research include racial disparities and inequalities in education and influential factors that influence Black males' academic achievement and mental health outcomes. Additionally, as a clinician, Dr. Jackson enjoys outreach and community engagement through his social media platforms, such as his Instagram at The Black Male Therapist. Check it out. It's got some good stuff on there to promote mental health awareness, inspire youth, and empower others. Dr. Jackson has a private practice in the Las Vegas area where he serves a diverse clientele. Dr. Jackson, always good to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm super excited. So hopefully we get this thing started and just enjoy. So at first, I want to thank my brother's keeper and the Building Men program for allowing me to be a part of this important conversation. I'm super excited to share what I have for you all today. And hopefully you learn something. I'm pretty sure you will. And hopefully this is very engaging as well as I have this important conversation. And so when I was thinking about doing this particular keynote address, I was wondering, what is going to be my title? What should I discuss? And like Building Men, I want to talk about the journey to becoming a man from a mental health perspective. And so that's why I decided to title this particular conversation, The Journey to Becoming a Man. So before we do anything else, let's get started and get this thing going. So what is a man? What is a man? Think about the messages you've heard growing up. Think about the things you've heard in your life before. What makes a man, and what exactly is a man? When I think about the Black and brown community, I think about the misconceptions about what a man is. Being a Black individual myself, I often grew up in a household where I was told I can't be too soft, that I had to be hard, right? That I had to be tough, that there's no opportunity for me to cry or be upset, right? When I think about the brown communities and the Latinx culture, I think about the word machismo, and that's that over-exaggeration of masculinity. And while there's very positive things about the machismo culture, there's some aspects of it that really focus on this hyper-masculinity of being tough, being superior. I think about that in our Black and brown communities, our racial ethnic minority communities, and I think about how that develops a misconception about what a man is. We're socialized to believe that men are really tough, we're emotionless, that we sacrifice for others, but we don't do what's necessary for us, that we avoid our problems, we minimize them. It is what it is, we'll figure it out. And when we do that, we develop characteristics about what a man is that is related to toxic masculinity. Some people don't even know that masculinity itself is a socially constructed attribute. So what I'm saying is that masculinity was created by us in society. We decided what colors were masculine, what colors were feminine. We decided what characteristics were masculine, what characteristics were feminine. It's made up. We literally made this up. However, we have now developed certain characteristics that really put us in a tough spot as men in our society. When I think about that, I think about who it impacts. It definitely impacts our work environments and how people view us as Black and brown individuals, and why we feel like we have to be twice as tough or twice as hard. It definitely influences our family, our kids, our little brothers and sisters who are looking up to us. And most importantly, it impacts us as men, as young men in our society today. And so I want to talk to you all about what I think a man is, right? So these are all old pictures of me from high school, right? Listen, I was in a different age. You know, we had the tall tees, we had the balls with the straps. You know what I'm saying? I had the soldieries and the Air Force Ones back in the day. Like that was the jam, right? That was my time. And I often learned the definition of a man because of my father. I had an opportunity to have my father around, which I know is not always the case for all of us. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity. But I learned so much from my father. My father was a very, very wise man. And he is a very, very wise man, shall I say. He was born in the 40s. He was born in New Orleans, grew up in Syracuse, New York, and spent a lot of years there. And with his life being born in the 40s, you're around about some tough times for Black individuals. He was around when civil rights movement was happening, when segregation was happening. And so he developed a mantra probably from his father that for us to get noticed as minorities, we have to be twice as good at any and everything. And that includes being a man. We got to be that much more of a man, right? But my father was very, very bright. And he used to tell me all the time that, son, there's no age requirement to becoming a man, right? There's no age requirement to becoming a man. He also said age is nothing but a number, right? This is one of my favorite artists, Aaliyah. Rest in peace, or our soul. But if y'all know this, kudos to you. You definitely a coach in the music game. But Aaliyah had a song called Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. And I thought it would be great to just kind of pay homage to her. But when my father was teaching me about what a definition of a man is, he often said, age is nothing but a number. You don't become a man just because you're 18. Right? And as a kid, I'm like, what do you mean, Dad? At 18, I can do this. I get tried as an adult. But it's like, son, just because you're 18, it doesn't make you a man. And because you're coming 18, doesn't make you a man. I was a prince so ready to be a young king that I wasn't listening to what he really was saying about this. My father said, you know, there's some boys out there that are 40 years old. There's some men out there that are 16. It depends on the circumstances that they're faced with and how they handle things. It's what you do in actions of time and need that really make you to become a man. It doesn't mean that we're perfect. My father said a man has two things that they keep in mind as they move forward for the actions. And that's accountability and responsibility. I think about a true test of a man, something I learned in college. And it talked about a true test was not during things when things are well or things are good, during comfort and convenience, but during times of conflict and controversy. It was what you do in these moments when it's hard, when it's challenging. How do you hold yourself accountable? How do you become responsible in these challenging moments? That was what really helps you become a man. Not when things are well, not when things are easy. And so I remember my dad saying that and I listened and I said, okay, that makes sense. But as I think about that definition, as I became a collegiate scholar and a mental health advocate and educator myself, I think about what that really looks like for us. And so when I think about accountability, what does it mean to be accountable? I don't like y'all, when I don't know certain things, I go to Merriam-Webster, go to the dictionary. And so I went to the dictionary and it said accountability, you got to look for the word accountable. And then I was like, okay, fine, look for the word accountable. Give me the definition. I just want to understand. And the definition of accountable says subject to giving account, answerable, or capable of being explainable. I don't know about y'all, but I'm not the best at comprehension. So when I read that, like I had to look at it a few times and I had to like go to like 3 or 4 other definitions. But I finally think I got what accountability means, or what at least means in this context. Accountability is taking ownership for your actions, your interactions, the things you say, everything, the things you do, all that. Accountability is about ownership of your past and how it is influencing your present. So my dad said you have to be accountable and responsible to become a man. I think that's what he meant by accountable. Now, how about responsibility? Again, you know me, went to Merriam-Webster, and it gives me a whole bunch of definitions. There's so many things to talk about when you think about accountability and responsibility, but responsibility in particular, I was like, this is a lot of definitions, right? So I want to go to 2A. It says able to answer for one's conduct, and obligation. When I think about that, I think about responsibility is about not what you necessarily do in the past, like accountability, but it is doing what you being accountable, but responsible moving forward, right? And so what I mean by that, being responsible is about the present to the future. It's you're doing intentional things to make a difference along this way. That's what being responsible is. Accountable, again, about the past to the present. Responsibility is about the present to the future, right? And I finally got there and it clicked for me. But as a mental health professional, I think not only do we have to be accountable and responsible to become men, I think we have to be accountable and responsible in at least 3 different domains. And those 3 different domains are our physical domain, our emotional domain, and our mental domain, right? But when I think about those 3 things, I think about in which ways in all 3 of these unique, distinct domains are we able to hold ourselves accountable and responsible along our journey to become a man? So what I think about, if you remember the title of the presentation, it's a journey to become a man. So what I want you all to do is I want y'all to join me on this journey as I describe what does it look like for us to become men. In this journey, you get to ride your own vehicle. And I'm going to break it down each of these domains related to a car. So that we can really understand how does each of these 3 domains relate to one another and how they connect to us to get across our journey. So buckle up, prepare your vehicle. It's time to go for the ride. So let's start the physical domain. The physical domain is the car style, the body, the color, whatever it is. It's our outside frame. Think of our bodies as you see it. Think of how you see me. You see my physical domain, right? Now, some domains might be Ferraris, some might be Corollas, some might be Audis, some might be Mustangs, right? I always like the saying, yeah, I got my car, it gets you from A to B. The goal of the car is not to look good. The goal of the car is to get you from one place to another safely, right? So I think about the domain, I think about different cars, and oftentimes we see a Ferrari compared to maybe a Mitsubishi, and we look at it like that Ferrari got to be faster. And the reason why we do that is because we assume based on our physical frames about things about certain people. People look at us as Black and brown individuals, Black men, Black and brown young men, and based on the way we look, our frames develop stereotypes, attributes, assumptions, just like we would as a Ferrari. We see a Ferrari, oh yeah, that mug is fast, right? But what we don't really know is based on looking on the outside of the car, what's inside of it? What kind of engine does it have? Does it even have an engine? Because a Ferrari could be just good to look at, but you can't even get in it. It's just a mold, it's a shell of itself. And so that within itself is not enough to make the car go, but it gives you a potential to understand what that car is capable of. It's like when people see us and see how we look, our frames, they have a potential. They see the potential that we may have or have assumptions, expectations based on how we look. And so what does it mean to be accountable physically in our physical domain? Glad you asked. What it means to be accountable is take ownership to what you are doing to your body. It's important to recognize, what are you eating? What are you fueling? What's your gas, right? Are you exercising, right? Do you drink water? Do you sleep, right? And as a young man, we're getting to explore, getting ready for college or high school. We do some things probably we shouldn't do underage, right? We might drink. We might use certain substances. But I want you to recognize that by doing these things, we're polluting that body. We're influencing, impacting how we may present, what color that style may be, what frame that may be, right? So it's important for us to be able to recognize and be accountable for what we've done, right? In order for us to grow, we got to be able to have a baseline. So accountability of your physical domain means having a baseline for what it really is. Being accountable for what you've done and what you didn't do for your body. to keep this physical domain up, right? Sometimes we look at cars, we look at the outside of it, we know, you know what I'm saying, people call them hoopties or whatever. We know that it probably is run down the inside because it's not been taken care of across the board. In the exact same way, if we don't take care of ourselves on the outside, people may assume the wrong things about what we have on the inside, right? So I want y'all to keep that in mind. Now, what does it mean to be responsible for our physical domain? Remember, accountability is about ownership, right? Responsibility is recognizing where you're at and figuring out where you need to go. So what you got to do to be responsible in your physical domain, take action. Do something different, right? Do something different. If you know you haven't been sleeping very well, haven't been taking care of yourself and not getting enough sleep, figure out how to get more sleep. If you know you haven't been dieting well or eating the right type of stuff, change your diet, right? Remember, the past to the present is really the accountability. Take ownership of what happened before, but knowing that doesn't have to be and define you moving forward. You have the responsibility to do something different when you know something different. That's what we do in our physical domain. Now, I think we very much understand the physical domain, the outside of our car, you know, how to make it nice and sweet and keep it up to date. As you know, as I said earlier, the physical domain, that's the outside shell, only gives us a potential of what could be inside. We hope it has an engine. We hope it has other things. We don't know that. So when you think about the next domain, our emotional domain, I think about the ability to allow the car to move. It's a horsepower. It's a speed, right? As you know, we can have emotional roller coasters. We have times when we're happy. We have times when we're sad. We have times when we're passionate, our foot's on the gas. When we're motivated, our foot's on the gas, right? We're focused, our foot's on the gas. And when it happens, we tend to get done with things faster. We tend to be more efficient with our time, right? And so in our emotional domain, our ability to put our foot on the gas when needed to help us get quicker to our destination is important. Now, sometimes we may go a little too fast. It's important for us to be able to recognize when we're going too fast without slowing down when we need to, because we may miss our exit. If we miss our exit, then it's going to take us longer on our journey to become men, right? And not only that, if we go too fast, we may be burnt out. We may experience emotional detachment. We may be emotionally exhausted. We may become avoidant, right? And when we do that, as well, as much as we want to kick off the gas and keep on pushing, we're running on E. We're running on E. We got to know how to preserve our emotional domain. And so when you think about what does that look like for us, it's about being accountable in our emotional domain. Now, what I mean about being accountable is we all make mistakes. Again, what I mentioned in the beginning is that to becoming a man is not about being perfect, but taking accountability, responsibility for our actions, regardless of whatever they may be. So I think about being accountable. And when I think about that, mostly be accountable for our emotional mistakes. A lot of us had times we blew up on people. We hurt people, right? We've caused pain to others. A lot of us recognize that there's been times where we weren't the best person we can be or doing the best things that we can do, right? We have to be accountable. We have to be aware of what we're feeling right now and how to get the best out of ourselves. And this is how you remain accountable, take ownership in your emotional domain. Now, when you think about that, there's more ways of handling that. There's more ways of going about that, right? So when I think about that, how do we become responsible in this domain? I think about being intentional with our future decisions, right? So there's this word called EQ, or emotional intelligence. And funny story about EQ, I am a mental health professional. I've been practicing for about 7-8 years, right? Use the word emotional intelligence all the time. I never used the word EQ. I didn't even know it was like a short paraphrase for it, right? It wasn't until about a year ago I had a student, and the student kept on saying EQ, EQ, EQ. And I'm over here looking at them like, okay, they're saying this, like I should definitely know this word. And they're like, yeah, EQ, like emotional intelligence. I'm just like, why would somebody create the word EQ to make it emotional intelligence? And then it just dawned on me one day, like, you know, intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, like that's just EQ, IQ. it makes sense. But I didn't know that. And so if this is a new term for you all, that's perfectly fine, right? And so what is emotional intelligence? How do we build that? Emotional intelligence is being able to recognize what you're feeling and being able to identify it. Many of us Black and brown individuals, we grow up on being on 5 emotions and we feel like we only have 5: happy, sad, mad, angry, or something else, right? We think we only have this handful of emotions, right? Nobody told us how to be. What does envious look like, or jealousy looks like, right? Or even feeling inadequate. We didn't learn that. And so we grow up in a society thinking we have less emotions as men, and that all of a sudden other individuals maybe have more emotions, when that's not realistic. We all have the same amount of emotions. The difference is not all of us can describe them all. Not all of us can identify them all. And that's not all our fault. Sometimes it's how we were socialized. I think about if I had twin kids on the ground, one may be identified as a baby girl, one identifies as my baby boy. If my baby girl falls, scrapes her knee, I'm gonna pick her up, I'm gonna let her express her emotions, I'm gonna take care of her. My son falls and scrapes his knee, I might say, man, go play. The less you play, the more you play, the less you feel. You'll be all right. You'll figure it out. We're conditioning our children. We've been socialized to not be able to identify and express our emotions. But emotional intelligence is all about doing just that. Understanding what you're feeling, another time you may have felt that before, and most importantly, be able to figure out what you need to do to overcome it. How are you going to cope with this feeling? If you're feeling sad, how do you become happy? It's important for us to be responsible with our emotional intelligence, because by able to do that, we're able to navigate these situations more effectively and efficiently and faster. We got to understand emotional intelligence, right? We got to understand how to push that gas and when we need to hit on that brake. And if we're on a brake, how we get our foot off the brake and push the gas. Now, we talked about the physical domain, the outside of the car. We talked about the emotional domain, the engine, the gas, and the brake. But those two things by itself are not enough to make a car go. So what do you think? What do we need to make the car go? Thank you. I'm glad you asked. This is our mental health domain. Believe it or not, our mental health domain is the driver. It is the control center. If you think about your driving, think about if you have a car, you have the engine, you have the gas, you have the brake. No journey is a straight shot, right? You got to know when to take a left. You got to have somebody controlling you to take a right. You may even need somebody to be able to control to let you know that it's time for you to take a U-turn, come back, because the direction you're going is so far the wrong way that you're not going to get to your journey the way that you want to be. We got to take care of our driver. We got to take care of our control center. And that is our mental health domain. All these things, mental, emotional, physical, work together to let our car go to the journey. Let our car go to the trip. Without the mental health domain, our car doesn't move. It has all the potential. It has all the parts inside and out. But without our driver, without our control center, the car is going nowhere. Right? But you first got to know when you're going the wrong way. Right? How does your driver know that it's going the wrong way? Well, glad you asked. I am a firm believer that awareness brings the opportunity for change. I truly believe it's impossible to change something that you're completely unaware of. I'm gonna give y'all an example. Y'all being in Syracuse, y'all being upstate, y'all know all about the cold. Syracuse was the only place in my life that I visited or spent time with my family where I had to shovel to get out and a shovel to get back in, right? It was shoveling all day. Do not miss that, right? But it's something that I had to recognize that if I wanted to walk outside, and sometimes when I didn't want to catch the news or check my phone for the weather, that I wanted to feel how cold it was for myself. I walk outside and my body reacts in a way that gives me a sense of awareness about if I'm cold or not. If I start shivering, my body's telling me, hey, go put on a jacket. Or me on the West Coast in Las Vegas, I go outside and the sun's beaming, I know I can wear a tank top or if I need to put on some sweats. If my body didn't tell me that I needed to do something to protect myself or to make me feel warmer or colder, I wouldn't do it. If I didn't have that sense of awareness about this thing, I would not have the opportunity to make a change or do something different. right? And so that's what we need to be able to make our U-turn or to make a left or right when we're going the wrong way. We need that sense of awareness. Now, I know you're wondering, how do we do that? How do we hold ourselves accountable in the mental health domain? Again, thank you all for asking. So when I think about what does it mean to be accountable in the mental health domain, I first think about what does it mean to not be accountable in the mental health domain. Imagine if we don't care about our driver, we don't take care of our mental health, we don't care about our control center. As you can probably think about is with the car, we're not going to get pretty far. If not, we're not going to get going at all without the driver. So what does this look like for us as human beings? Well, when we don't handle our mental health, it then influences our emotional well-being, right? We're not good mentally, we start being more irritable. We snap at people more. We're upset longer. We work slower. We're not interested in as many activities as before, right? We're developing or showing symptoms of depression. And then it doesn't stop there at the emotional domain. It then impacts and permeates to your physical domain. Because that's when people can tell that something's wrong with you. They're like, yo, man, you're not as happy as you used to be. Man, you don't got that glow about you. Man, what's happening? Something's off about you today, right? When we don't take care of our mental health domain, it then permeates and spreads to the emotional domain. It then spreads to the physical domain. Remember that hoopty I talked about? If that car was taken care of the inside out, it will be in mint or best condition. But when we don't take care of it, it starts to spread outward. And so what it looks like to be accountable for us so that doesn't happen to us is being able to recognize and understand that if we don't do what we need to do in the mental health domain, our vehicle is not going to run the same. So we have to know ourselves. What I mean by know ourselves, we have to know our strengths. You know when we work well, what helps us to work well. And most importantly, we got to be able to understand our areas of growth. We got to know what we need to improve on. We got to be able to recognize how trauma has impacted us. We got to be able to recognize how maladaptive experiences impacted us. What happened in the past to us, as unfortunate as terrible as it might be, doesn't have to define us moving forward. We actually have a choice, right? I often hear, you know what, that's just how I am. That's just who I am. It is me, it is what it is. But our past doesn't have to create and define us in the present. We can do something different. We have the opportunity to do something different. We have to make a conscious decision to do something different. We have to make a conscious decision to not let the traumas, the experiences, these things that happened in the past to define us moving forward. We have to be able to understand where we need to grow. We have to be able to understand that we need help. We have to be able to be accountable at that baseline to be able to make it grow. Areas of growth only become strengths, only grow when we're able to identify them at their core first. We have to be able to recognize that for ourselves. That's how we hold ourselves accountable in that mental health domain. Now, how do you become responsible in the mental health domain? We have to do what is necessary to take care of our control center and driver. Now, if you remember my story about awareness speaks to opportunity for change, I didn't say awareness brings about change. Instead, what I said was awareness brings the opportunity for change. It's step one. Step two is a powerful piece, and that's being intentional. Awareness isn't intentionality. Intentionality is intentionality. That's the action. So if you know your areas of growth, you know the things you need to work on your traumas, you know you need to work on your maladaptive experiences, you know you need to work on these things that have been bothering you and keeping you up at night. You got to be able to recognize what you need and then tap into the resources and support mechanisms that are out there, like the My Brother's Keepers, like Building Men program, holding people around you to help you be accountable, to give you support, to give you the things you need to be able to make sure that you're in the best part of your day, that your vehicle knows where it's going, that you're heading to the right direction. In fact, another resource, which is often untapped in our society, is therapy itself. What I want you to think about is therapy as a resource. Therapy is not something you do when you're sick and you just need help. Therapy is not something you do in crisis. Therapy is something you can utilize at any time of your life. When things are going amazing, you just want to be better. When things are not going as good, you want to improve. I often talk about therapy as a metaphor to tutoring. Think about it. Some of us went to tutoring before. Some people were failing. I was failing and need to pass. Sometimes I had a C, want to make a B want to make an A, keep my A, or maybe want to learn how to be a tutor one day. And the exact same thing, people can go at any stage of therapy and benefit from its production. The thing is, what you put into therapy is what you get out of therapy. So you got to be willing to do the work. You got to be willing to be intentional in this process to get the most out of it. Therapy is not something we do when we're sick or something's wrong with us. Therapy is a resource at any point in time in our life. We can benefit from it if we let ourselves do so. And if we take control of our control center and our driver, guess what? Our journey is going to be that much more efficient. In fact, I want you to think about therapy as a GPS. I want you to think about therapy as Siri, as Waze, Google Maps, whatever you use to help you get from point A to point B. Therapy is that. Therapy is going to say, hey, it's time for us to exit. But in your car, if you don't want to take that exit, you don't have to. All that means is just going to add more time to your journey. And that's okay. But just know that therapy can be an opportunity to help you, direct you about when it's okay to take a left, when it's maybe time to take a U-turn, when it's time to maybe slow down. It can help you along your journey. And so when I think about this, I think about why is this so important for us? And I think about the importance of time. Time waits for no one. We oftentimes in our society think about time as this quantifiable thing. I know we all heard of the phrase time is money, right? Like we can just pull out a 20 and be like, hey, give me 20 more minutes. Time is ever moving. Time will move with us or without us. And so when you think about being efficient a part of this journey, we have to take into consideration the time that we're going to be utilizing to make that possible. It's that much more important to be intentional about this process, because when we're building or becoming men, we have to make sure that we're utilizing the time necessary, the supports necessary, the resources necessary for us to get there. We got to keep those in mind. It's up to us. It's up to you how fast and how quick your journey will end to becoming a man or to accomplishing great things. It's up to you what you do in the time. It's up to you how do you utilize the time. So be intentional about that process. And recognize that just because somebody may get there faster, that has nothing to do with you. Your journey is your journey. Your journey may have more hiccups. Your journey may have more speed bumps. Always say, along your journey, mistakes will still be made. And that's okay, because guess what? You don't trip going backwards. You trip going forwards. You're still going towards your journey. If anything, learn from those speed bumps. Learn that maybe you need to slow down some of these times. Maybe you need to speed up in these other situations. Learn from these opportunities so that you can do your best to complete your journey in a time that's allotted for you to do so. The last thing I want to leave y'all with is the importance of staying the course, right? Stay the course. Keep in mind these different dimensions, the physical, mental, and emotional dimension of your car. And knowing that if you're doing what's necessary to be accountable, responsibility in these different dimensions, that you are doing what's necessary to become or to finish your journey of becoming a man. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed giving you all this talk.
Wow, Dr. Lawrence Jackson, thank you so much. And he's going to stick around for a little bit of conversation in a minute, but we really appreciate that very powerful conversation. I know I was thinking about what car I am, and I was thinking about a lot of what you said, and taking care of myself and what gives me strength and those kinds of things. Very important and very powerful to think about for our conversation today. All right. So we've got some high-powered brothers that's ready to pour some knowledge and inspiration into you. But first, we will meet our beautiful young My Brothers Keepers fellows who have some background information and some resources that they would like to share. So let's meet them.
So hi everyone, my name is Abdullahi Sherwa.
My name is Omar Hussein.
And today our MBK service project is about men's mental health.
We are doing this project today to bring awareness to this problem.
So let's start off with our agenda for today. First, society's influence, mental health symptoms, the risk factors, groups significantly impacted, and lastly, where to get help.
Society's influence. There's a stigma in today's society where it teaches young boys that while they're growing up, they can't be wimps or they have to be the man, even though they're at a young age. And this is causing our young boys to develop problems such as closing off from the world whenever something is wrong with them, or not telling people that something is going on.
Some of the statistics in mental health diagnosis are depression. 6 million men all around the world suffer from depression each year, and this male depression often goes undiagnosed. Approximately 19.1 million American adults suffer from anxiety, ages 18 to 54, and approximately 3 million men have a panic disorder, agoraphobia, or any other phobia. 2.3 million Americans are affected by bipolar disorder. In psychosis and schizophrenia, approximately 3.5 million people in the US are diagnosed with schizophrenia, and 90% who are diagnosed are by the age of 30. Eating disorders account for 10% of patients with bulimia and anorexia, and 35% of those patients with binge eating.
Possible causes and effects. Genetic predisposition, military-related traumas, relationship issues, and living arrangements. Those causes lead to social isolation, unemployment, occupational issues, and substance abuse.
Some groups today significantly impacted include LGBT men. Society often has stigmas against these homosexual men, and they're discriminated in all types of ways, whether it's verbally, physically, and sexually. Military veterans can get PTSD from the nature of their past job, being in the military all those years, and they try to lessen those effects through alcohol and drugs, twice the rate of other people. And African American men throughout history have been systematically oppressed and discriminated. And these socioeconomic disparities often impact their mental health a lot. And athletes football players can develop CTE and other injuries due to the contact of the game, the physical contact throughout the years, and they don't realize this negative effect on their mental health.
More statistics. Approximately 1 in 5 men develop alcohol dependency during their lives. And if that's a group of 200 people in one building, that's about 40 men from that group of people that have alcohol dependency. Approximately 668,000 men die annually from alcohol-related causes. Men are often involved in drugs due to issues involving finances and family issues, which can sometimes trigger mental health conditions. Men only account for 36% of psychological therapy referrals. Suicide is the largest cause of death for men under 50.
So here are some active ways that we can help today. Just simply reaching out to your community and providing awareness and needs, getting involved actively by volunteering at mental health centers all across your community or anywhere. Also, just help destroy these men's mental health stigmas by having those uncomfortable conversations, whether it's your family, friends, or anybody around. Just simply acknowledging that mental health is there and having transparency in regards and you're discussing with people. Also, lastly, just educating people on its severity and how it impacts others is really important.
Organizations that can help in the central New York area: Helio Health, CNY Psychiatric Center, Hutchins Psychiatric Center, Liberty Resources Integrated Healthcare, and St. Joseph Health Hospital of Mental Health. In conclusion, you could be the change of this stigma. All you need to do is sit down with a friend, your brother, or your father, and ask them, how are you doing? Because deep down, there's always something going on. you never know.
So thank you for attending our presentation. We have a great panel of speakers coming up next.
Wow. These brothers are doing some great work. Thank you so much to Omar and Abdullahi. I'm so proud of these young brothers who are part of the Building Men program and doing some powerful things. Isn't it great to see these young men doing some good stuff? Listen, y'all I am excited about these young men and the work that they're doing. All right, let's meet our panelists because they're doing some work as well in our community. Brandon Holly, Dr. Brandon Holly, is a Syracusan. He received his doctorate degree in marriage and family therapy from Syracuse University. Prior to Syracuse, he received a bachelor's degree from the University of Iowa and a master's degree from Mount Mercy University. He's passionate about social justice, politics, and mental health, and he has presented at the local, state, national, and international level on the areas of poverty, neighborhood disadvantage, and access to mental health treatment as it pertains to Black people. In addition, he has published scholarly articles on areas of gun violence, poverty, mass incarceration, parent-child relationships, and mental health. He's the original developer of the university community collaboration between Syracuse University's Marriage and Family Therapy Program and Syracuse Community Connections, of which provides free therapeutic services to Black and Brown communities by therapists who look like those Black and Brown communities. Currently serves as the Regional Program Director of Short-Term Crisis Respite Programs at Liberty Resources Incorporated. Brandon, thank you for being a part of our panel. Brad Butler II is the CEO and founder of Brad Butler II and Associates, LLC. He's an award-winning motivational speaker, author, student advocate, and speaker coach. Before Brad became all he is today, he spent many of his years fighting to overcome adversity. He struggled with parents who had substance abuse, or as he calls them, urban pharmacists, academic struggles, and countless amounts of naysayers. Despite everything, Brad managed to find solace in sports like football, and his moments on the field are what inspired his close friends and family to coin the nickname B-Rad. What's up? At the tender age of 8, Brad experienced an unexpected transition that changed the course of his life forever. Brad, nice to see you, bro. Adrian Hargrove is an avid youth mentor, educational mental health advocate, and motivational speaker who has dedicated his life to service to others. Through his nonprofit organization, The Heart Grove, Adrian draws from experiences in his personal life as an example to get to the heart of the matter and motivate and inspire youth to recognize their strengths, overcome obstacles, and achieve their goals and dreams. Adrian serves as a program director at the Harris Home for Children, a group home facility serving foster youth in Huntsville, Alabama. He's also the Senior Vice President of Philanthropy and Community Involvement with Affinity Recruiting, LLC. Adrian earned his bachelor's degree in business administration, his master's degree in public administration, and is currently earning his doctoral degree in educational and organizational leadership. And last but not least, Chris Marvel is an award-winning author, media contributor, and inspirational youth speaker. Chris is a dynamic, highly sought-after speaker and trainer who captivates audiences with his down-to-earth, entertaining style. He embraces modern conversational topics regarding empowerment, pivoting against comfort, leadership, and living a purpose-driven life. Marvel is the author of several books and journals while also writing for several publications. Marvel also is the co-host of the relevant, brash, and vulnerable, the Fresh Life podcast, which talks about wellness, mental health, and living a purpose-driven life. He's been spoken of on many media outlets, including ESPN and Fox Sports, HuffPo, among others, also working with future Hall of Famer Terrell Owens and other notable professional athletes and entertainers. He has also contributed to various radio shows around the country, including a regular guest spot on Radio 1 in Cleveland. Chris Marvel, we welcome you to the program. And once again, so here's how it's going to go for the rest of the night. For the time we have left, a little bit of time we have left, we will be asking you some of the questions. These questions have been prepared by the My Brothers Keepers Fellows. This is many of the youth in our program have specific questions that they want to ask all of you. So, bring your best shot because we don't have a lot of time. So here we go. First, let me ask you, Dr. Brandon Holly. Oh, I'm sorry. One more panelist to introduce. My bad. You've already met Dr. Lawrence Jackson, and he's hanging around and he's hanging out with us as well. Yeah. My bad on that one. All right. Okay. So now we go. All right, Brandon, let me ask you this. What are the biggest factors affecting your mental health during this time of COVID? Now that we're starting to move out of it, but what was the biggest factors you think that affected our mental health during this time of COVID?
It's a great question. I think me personally, not being able to do the things that I normally do. So going to the gym, little things, going to the coffee shop, getting a break away from home, being confined, really. So when you aren't able to, engage in the regular activities that you do in life, that really starts to build up this isolation. And for me, that was the biggest factor for me.
Adrian, what about you?
I would say the same. I like to try to get out and play a little basketball from time to time. So, all my leagues being canceled and, not being able to just kind of get out and, like Doc said, just do the things you normally do. I think that played a huge role.
Chris, what about you?
I would definitely say that it was sharing the space of my house with everybody all at one time.
I know that feeling.
listen, brother, I have never seen my kids more than I did. And trust me, I love them to death. But if they don't get out my house, I promise you, I was trying to find a school that was open somewhere. I live in Cleveland. And I said to myself, is there a school in Dayton that could open? That's 3 hours away. But, to be honest with you, that's really what it comes down to, is just, becoming comfortable with the discomfort. And that's really what I had to work through.
Brad, what about you?
For me, the biggest thing that I had to adjust to is that I'm an extreme extrovert. So being outdoors, being around people, like that's where I get my energy from. That's where my passion that comes from. So taking that away from me is almost like putting kryptonite on the top of Superman's chest. But I also had to realize that I had a glaring weakness that I needed to actually address. So I did not necessarily need to be around people all the time for me to be the person that I am and to be inspirational, motivational, and vibrant. I could still be that person when I'm at home with my wife.
What about you, Doc Lawrence Jackson?
Man, I feel like they hit it all on the head. I think you take that into consideration, what I'm hearing over and over again is the loss of control. The loss of control of that we were able to do, go in the gym we want to, have the house by ourselves, be outside and entertain or interact with other people. And so anytime we lose our sense of our control, it's hard for us to adjust. We're habitual. We're people of cycles. We like doing the same thing over and over again, right? We're cyclic in nature. And so when we lose that, when a life transition like the pandemic comes in the way, it takes away that control for us. And that's hard for anybody to give that up, including myself.
Certainly there was a lot of loss, particularly in the African-American community. How would you say, how did the pandemic affect us, Black men and Black boys in particular? I'll start with you again, Brandon.
Yeah, great question. I want to bring us back to the Black youth. I think that one of the things that we often find comfort in is being around, our peers, going to these community centers, going out hooping, playing basketball. I know in some cities, they literally had to take the basketball hoops off. We're closing parks, community centers were closed. So you take away some of the only positive influences that we see in some of these communities and, expect people to operate business as usual. I think that was one of the biggest impact on the Black communities and particularly the youth.
What I'm hearing you say, and I'm going to tie some of the things that I heard from Lawrence's participation. Thank you for letting me say that, Lawrence. And can I call you Brandon? And feel free to jump in. We're having a conversation. When you talked about being, in some ways you were saying master of your domain, right? Physical, emotional, mental health. And I'm thinking that you also talked about not being in control. And then the young men talked about not being able to talk about it, right? That's kind of what they said. Give me a little bit more about that. And then Brad, you pick that up after Lawrence speaks, please.
Yeah. I think that the toughest part about that transition is the outlets are gone. We oftentimes we're very creative right? We're very creative from our ancestors. We're super creative. And so we utilize art, we utilize our activities, our abilities to express ourselves. And when you take those away, it's hard to express who we are, right? And so when you can't go outside, when you can't enjoy things, or when you don't have access to instruments and things like that, because you're not in band, you're not doing these type of things anymore, you lose that creative edge and that ability to express yourself. So how else do you do it then? And we had to do our best to figure out how we can create outlets and mechanisms to help our kids still be able to express themselves, right? And so for the young man, I feel it. Yeah, this pandemic sucked because it took that away. So how do we make up for it? I appreciated how we utilize Zoom more and social media more. So yeah, we can't pull up on each other, but we can have a Zoom party and things like that. Figuring out what we can do to be able to still engage one another and have these moments and spaces where we're having these important conversations, even though it may be different than how it was before.
Brad?
Oh man, when I think about like how tough it was, I feel like it it was like it forced us to detox from the thing that we would normally use to help us cope with life, right? The thing that we would normally run to help us, just get through the day, get through the week, get through the month. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I believe that we're not living in a pandemic, we're living in purpose. Because the pandemic itself, the only thing it did was actually force you to be the person who you really are, to come face to face with that individual. And it did nothing but amplify whatever it was that you were already doing. If you were a motivational person and you were out there speaking life into people, you did it tenfold. If you were already in a spot where you might not have been doing well within your mental health, that showed, right? So those things need to be addressed. So I believe that this situation, it just showed us who we really are as people and our weaknesses, the flaws that we had, and the things that we desperately need to address, especially within the Black community.
So, Chris, how then can men feel more comfortable opening up about the very things that you just talked about without being forced to or thinking that they can be tougher, that they have to tough it out by themselves, right? Because many of us, y'all shared, how y'all felt, but many of us aren't really comfortable saying that out loud to others.
Yeah, so I do believe that, of course, our highest calling is, of course, to be loved, heard, and have a sense of belonging. And oftentimes men's ego, by nature is a little bit terrified to kind of break the mold in which we've been brought up into. So, when your father has taught you repeatedly that, hey, boy, get up, don't cry, right, be tough. When your grandfather, also kind of, did the same thing to him, if he was going through a tough time, you witnessed that. That was inculcated into you. That wasn't something that just left you because you became a man. What it did was it probably became calcified, if anything else. And so when we think about these conversations that these brilliant, beautiful, intelligent brothers is having, what we're looking at are men who have identified within themselves the weakness and the fragility of their ego. And they understand that there is powerlessness in masculinity. And so when we really recognize that, when we really sit back and say, you know what, the person that I have been groomed to be is causing me to be weak. It's actually holding me back. It's not allowing me to really exude strength. My wife always says this. She says, she used to say this when I was, when we had first got married. She said, Chris, if there's one thing you're going to do, you would rather die on your white horse than to fall off if it was going over a cliff. And I thought that was very powerful. Because what it showed me was, brother, you are willing to lose everything in your life. You are willing to not deal with your own mental health. You're willing to. There are brothers who legit have went through this pandemic without a job because they lost it. And because pride and ego sat in place, they said, I may have lost my job, but I won't work there. Because if they see me working there, that means I'm losing. Listen, I may be going through a real mental tough time right now, but if they see me going to the therapist, that means that I'm losing. But the truth is, we're losing when we don't acknowledge that we're losing. Right. And so if anything else, it is in this season that brothers have to acknowledge, not alone in silos, but to join other brothers who are being vulnerable and being transparent and saying, man, can you bring me along until I'm strong enough in my weakness to do the same?
That's very powerful. But it's also very scary, Adrian, right? I mean, that's scary for us to do. And there's also stigmas attached to mental health, particularly in the African American community. So this is twofold, and you all can jump in here anytime. One of the things that happens is, how do we get more comfortable even talking about the state of mental health? I know, like our frat, Omega Psi Phi, did a little thing this season called Brother, You're on My Mind, which was like every Wednesday during the pandemic, we were to reach out to check in with four brothers, right? Because of the loss of that connection. So how do we get rid of those stigmas attached to mental health? And then the other piece of that is, because Chris, you said, I'd rather go over the cliff than fall off the horse. What about this idea of how to deal with the anger associated with not being able to do the things that I'm used to doing? So twofold, stigma and anger. Adrian.
I'll jump in on the stigma part. I think as far as addressing the stigma, I think we just have to normalize it a little bit more. Again, I work with a lot of youth, and one of the things that I tell them a lot is, when you guys are just talking to each other, that's therapy. You know, I know all of us guys, we have the barbershop talks. That's therapy. You know, when we're talking in the gym and we're chopping it up about whatever, that's therapy. And so just kind of changing that stigma of what we think is therapy. And then I think, again, just joining brothers like, you know, ourselves. If I walk in and my therapist is Dr. Jackson, I feel a lot more comfortable talking to him than I might feel like somebody who doesn't look like me. You know, I feel like he'll be able to understand, and I might feel a little bit more comfortable talking about what I'm going through, because he can be like, man, I feel you, you know, versus somebody who doesn't look like me, hasn't had my experience, and may not be able to understand. So I think changing the stigma is just a process that we have to go through, and just, you know, showing our young men that when we talk to each other every day, that's therapy. It's just, you know, being okay with going a little bit deeper and saying, yeah, I was hurt about that, or, you know, that upset me. And then one other thing that I just had a conversation recently about with a young man, is he was talking about, well, men, I can't be emotional. And I was like, you see these athletes cry when they lose a game? You know, that's emotional. You lose a championship, that's emotional. So it's like, it's okay to show emotion, okay with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's okay to show emotion in that space, in that context, but not if you feel pain in the other context, right? We're particular about how we allow, what spaces we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in. But Brandon, the other piece of that is, a lot of us are not able to control how we feel, and it often leads to anger. And anger sometimes seems to, and I'm not the therapist, you got Dr. Holly, is that also masking fear as well, right? So talk to me about the good strategies for dealing with anger.
Yeah, so anger is a secondary emotion. So to me, anger doesn't mean much. It's like, what's really going on for you? So for men in general, depression often looks like anger, because we don't know how to express when we're feeling sad, when we're going through something. So when you feel yourself escalating, when you feel yourself wanting to lash out, you're dealing with something deeper. And that's probably a sign that, hey, it's time for me to go talk to someone. You know, and I want to touch on that, the societal influence piece, and particularly our Black youth. You know, we look up to the gatekeepers, you know, and for us, a lot of the times that's individuals in entertainment. And right now, more than ever, I think that we're speaking on the importance of mental health, and that's opening the door for individuals to engage. So when you look at people like Meek Mill, Charlamagne the God, Tarahi, talking about the impact that therapy has had on them, and people saying, okay, I'll step in the door and try that. You know, I'm feeling like I'm angry, and I know that this isn't anger, this is something deeper. Let me see if I can go find some therapy, talk to someone to talk about what I'm going through.
Brad, I see you over there. Tell me what you got on your mind, bro.
Man, like Dr. Brandon just said, like the emotions that we deal with are a lot of times it's secondary to the real underlying issue, especially with men, anger and depression. Like those things show up in different ways for us. And if we just get to the point where we start talking about what's going on with us, even if it's not, a therapy session, but going to speak to somebody that you feel comfortable with talking to, whether it's your mother, father, sister, brother, whomever it might be, that's a starting point. Just start somewhere so you can actually address the issue at hand and then go seek help later on when you build up enough confidence with speaking about your emotions and your feelings. Because a lot of times we know people are not going to necessarily just walk through the door and go into a counseling session with a complete stranger, right? So if they can get to the point where they can at least have a simple conversation with somebody that they know, like, and trust, that person is able to kind of guide them, like, okay, I've taken you as far as I can possibly go with this conversation here. Now you might want to go ahead and talk to an expert. Now when they go talk to an expert, they can give them the tips, the techniques, all the things that will actually help them to actually address the main issue at hand. And then they can get to the next point in their life and they can walk past that thing and say, okay, I dealt with it before, but now I know how to deal with it. And I believe that falls into the same category of Dr. Lawrence when he said the EQ, that emotional intelligence, knowing when you're at your breaking point. When you have a person who has reached their limit as far as their anger, the depression, those negative emotions that people normally face, they've gotten to that point because they've been adapting for way too long. And now they're at the breaking point. So we got to get them back to a space where they can kind of calm down and recognize, hey, okay, I've been in this space for entirely too long. I've been around these people for too long. I've been at this job for too long, whatever it might be for them. But they need to actually understand what's going on first so they can actually address it.
I look at this panel, two PhDs, another on the way to PhD, motivational speakers and all of that. This panel is an all-star panel, right? And yet I'm sure that there are times when you don't feel like that, right? And so how do we recognize that when we're supposed to be the all-star, right? When you're the man, although Bill the Man says be a man, not the man, right? How do you take care of yourselves, right? Are you in therapy? Like, we're looking at all of y'all and y'all have made it. How did y'all get here? And how can you recognize when your friend or someone else is not doing okay? And how do you deal with someone who appears to be struggling with a mental health concern? I'm gonna just sit back and y'all jump in on that.
Yeah. So as y'all know, I'm a whole therapist, right? I'm a whole therapist is also a client. I'm in therapy myself. And while this particular situation of me being in therapy is newer to me, I've learned so much about me. George, you hit on something earlier about feeling like we're not enough. I realized that I grew up in a household, no blame, that dealt with emotional neglect. Oftentimes as Black men in society, we are emotionally neglected.
Talk to me.
We're not tended to, right? And when that happens, it can manifest and create a sense of inadequacy that we can't even accept when people give us compliments. We can't even accept things for what they are. We can't even accept when people are being genuine, authentic with us because we live in a world that we haven't been emotionally tended to, right? And it was a aha moment when I'm telling about my experiences, and my therapist is like, yeah, it sounds like a lot of emotional neglect. I'm like, neglect? Not me. No. I keep telling more and more. It's like, yeah, do you feel like you're not enough sometimes? I'm like, I mean, yeah, sometimes at work, sometimes at home, sometimes in therapy. Then I'm like, dang, it's a lot more places than what I thought. And then it really helped me understand how these situations happened in the past have influenced me moving forward. And one of the things I kept on touching on, that what happened in the past doesn't have to define me. Because I've dealt with emotional neglect before, it doesn't mean I gotta pass it on. I gotta let it manifest in a way that I can't no longer take support. I will say right now I'm on a road to recovery. Right? I'm on a road to recovery in that process. And so I'm hopefully gonna get to a place where now I don't have to depend on somebody else's opinion or thoughts or beliefs about me for me to feel adequate about who I am. Right. And so I wanted to throw that out there real quick. Hey, I'm a therapist and I love the work I do. I'm a trainer. I'm a supervisor, the whole nine, but I had to also recognize that I can be a better person. I can improve. So when I say therapy is a resource, I truly believe at any stage, at any component, no matter how great and amazing and beautiful you are, you can really benefit from the process if you're willing to put in the work.
Yeah, I mean, I see. And I appreciate you sharing that and being vulnerable, right? Because that's right. You know, that's the hard part there. Let me get to some of these. Does anybody else want to get in on that? Because I'm gonna try to get to do all my questions for my young people. Make sure I get them in. Anybody else, Chris?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was actually gonna say, you know, even thinking back to what he was just saying, you know, this idea of, you know, making sure that we're breaking those cycles, you know. And so one of the things is my family, men never ever addressed, you know, any of their therapeutic needs. Those things were numbed out. You know, we didn't talk about it. Those were not, and they were on the surface. They were right in front of us, but because we have never had in our family a therapeutic alliance that we could really pull from, you know, we were always in this space of, hey, don't you tell my business outside of this house.
Word.
You know, and that right there is what kept so many of us trapped. And so as a Black man with 3 sons, I had to, you know, figure out, how am I going to break that? See, we always talk about generational curses and breaking these generational lines. It's not just through prayer, it's through action. Okay. And so, you know, because my kids can see me pray, they also know that daddy's in a Zoom meeting with his therapist at the same time. I'm also finishing my master's, you know, as a clinical therapist. So they're going to understand that as much as we clean the dishes, we got to clean our headspace. And looking back on it, I really wish in my younger 20s, when I was thinking about, you know, and planning how was I going to commit suicide when I was at my lowest point, I really wish I had the tools so that I didn't even reach that point. But because no man in my family, or even no woman for that sake, no one had those tools to really give me, I was on a limb. And if it wasn't by God's grace that, you know, the right men came into my life, you know, there go I possibly. And so I really look at it as, I have to do the work so my kids can see the work being done. And so now they know what it takes to stay healthy and stay fit mentally and not just physically.
Who saved your life?
That's funny. My barber, I walked into his chair one day and I was really depressed. I ended up, you know, getting booted out of school. I was 20 years old and I got booted out of University of Cincinnati, didn't have the money, came from nothing. And I got sent home and I arrived right back in Cleveland in the inner city with nothing. And I was at my lowest point I've ever been in my life to this day. And I sat in his chair getting my hair cut, and he could tell there was a spirit of heaviness on me. And there was something about, you know, the person that he's used to seeing since I was 14 that didn't really line up. And he said, man, listen, you know me, bro. Like, I so dope and you know that I was, but I'm telling you, there is a way out. And he introduced me to God. And he also introduced me to this amazing church that I belong to since then. And if it wasn't for him being brave enough to call me on my stuff, because listen, it's very easy to look at somebody and see them in a depraved state and say somebody else will talk to him. Or maybe he's too embarrassed for me to talk to him, or I don't want to make him embarrassed. He took on the challenge as a man, as a brother, and said, I got a sharp iron. And until he gets his sharp enough, I'm going to help him sharpen it until he can do so.
So Adrian and Brad, pick this up. What the young people want to know is, how do I help my friend if I notice this heaviness in them? Like, how do I help them? What can I do for them, right? At whatever stage they're at, when they're showing me some things that they're dealing with, either mental illness or some challenges, what are the best ways to help and reach out? So I'll let both of y'all deal with that.
If you're dealing with, or if there's someone out there who's dealing with somebody who is dealing with the situation that they know is a depressive situation, suicide, whatever it might possibly be, you know, they're just not themselves, right? You can tell. The best thing for you to do is be there for them, have a conversation with them, let them know, I see you, you're not alone, right? if you've experienced some of the difficulties that they've experienced, you can tell them your story, right? That's part of the reason why I go to the schools and I tell my story, right? So like Chris, with my father, like I don't remember my father actually telling me that he loved me until about, I think it was 2006. I was like 18 at that time. I don't remember my father actually telling me I loved me. He telling me that he loved me prior to that. So that does something to you, right? And there's so many different people who are experiencing all these different forms of mental trauma. So you have to be open to allowing that person to either come to you if they're ready to talk to you, but if not, like Chris said, being brave enough to go to a person and say, hey, listen, I see you, I hear you, you're not alone, and I want to be here for you. And if it's not right now, if you don't want to talk right now, I get it. But I just want you to know, whenever you are ready, I'm right here. Now, if it gets to the point where you believe that they're about to be of harm to themselves or someone else, then you need to get in contact with somebody that could give them the guidance, the help that they need, because that's an immediate situation. Now, no, I pray that that's not the situation that anybody ever has to deal with. But, if it is, then that's the extreme that you have to take it to, because they're in a situation where they're not thinking clearly anymore. And you might have to step in to do something to keep them from making a mistake that they can't come back from.
So we know, Adrian, that, obviously the adults got to recognize, and we got to recognize each other. But what about the young people and the relationships that they have with one another? Because and one of the things that when Dr. Lawrence Jackson talked about emotional neglect, I'm thinking abandonment and what that looks like, right? Emotional abandonment, emotional neglect. And if you're dealing with somebody who's experiencing that, how do we support that young person? If that's my boy, we both 15, 16, how do I help my boy, 12, 13?
So I think it's exactly like Chris said, that his barber did for him. When I have group with my guys at work at the youth program, that's one of the things I tell them every day. You guys are your own best advocate. I can't tell you how you're feeling, but the guys that are here with you, they can understand better than anybody. So if you see someone that's feeling that way, that's feeling down, just like Brad said, sometimes it's just being there. You might not have all the answers. You might not be able to, necessarily say the right thing. And so you don't have to really pressure yourself. It can just be, hey, bro, man, like I see you seem stressed out. It's going to be all right. I'm here for you if you want to talk about it. I get stressed out too sometimes. And just letting them know it's necessarily what you say. Sometimes it's just what you do. And just saying, hey, man, I got you. Just like I'm here, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be anything really deep.
Dr. Holly, tell me, how do I know if I'm getting better or if I'm depleting? What are some signs for me to look out for? And Dr. Jackson, if you didn't see his presentation earlier, he talked about physical signs and sleep deprivation and health, all of those kinds of things. But what are some other things that I should be looking out for to let me know that my health is either getting better or depleting?
Yeah, I want to go about this in a couple of ways. So I want to say, if you have made your way to the therapy room already, things are going to get worse before they get better. And I think that that's one thing that we need to let people know, because you're talking about all of these built up emotions that you've never talked about before. And at the beginning, it's going to seem like a lot, but that's really a process of, hey, I'm finally getting this off of my shoulders. That's part of the process to getting better. That's part of that journey. I want to go back to what we talked about earlier, because anger it's such a visible trait, and it's such a cancer, I think, in the Black community. If you feel yourself being angry, something's wrong, because you aren't just angry. Again, there's something deeper going on.
Well, but could it be the microaggression of living in a society that doesn't validate or value me as an African-American male? I mean, that's enough, right?
Certainly. And yes, even with that, George, right, there's an underlying message beneath that. So you aren't angry because you're being microaggressed against. You're angry because someone's making you feel as if you aren't enough. in the country that you live in. And so it's contributing to your self-esteem. So that's the root of the problem. That's what we need to actually be focusing on, and not the anger, which is really the secondary emotion. But that is a sign. If you feel like you're angry, or any of your friends or the people you love are expressing anger, there's something deeper going on, and it's time to offer a listening ear.
One of our young men want to know, what is gaslighting and how do you spot it and react to it properly? What is gaslighting? How do you react to it and respond to it properly? Who wants to take that?
Well, I'll jump in there real quick. Gaslighting, in the way that I've understood it, is the idea that your reality is not true. And we often, we see that we oftentimes see that when we're telling someone a truth, right? So when I'm telling my son, that hey man, you got to give better effort on the court. Like you're hooping, but you're not giving a great effort. And he's telling me, Dad, I'm giving it everything I got. I'm like, son, you were standing still. No, I wasn't. I was and what he's doing is he's trying to paint you a reality that's obviously not true. And so, the guys, the doctors on here, I would love to hear from them, what's their perspective on how to attack that. But in my estimation and in my experience, whenever someone has tried to, alter my reality about how I see anything, I have to stand in truth. I have to know thyself, to thy own self be true. I have to know exactly what that truth is, so that others don't move me off that space. So that when I am telling truth as a mentor, as a coach, as a parent, as a friend, that if we're not seeing eye to eye on whatever the truth is, I can't be moved off of that truth. I've already come to that conclusion.
Brandon, Dr. Holly, would you then define that, and then also tell us what the resources are locally if people are interested in getting mental health support?
Yeah, I think Chris hit the hammer on the nail for me with the definition.
How do you respond to it? And then what are the local resources for mental health support?
Yeah, the way I look at it is we have to be congruent with who we are as a person. So once you're okay with who you are as a person, it's really hard for somebody to change that. So once you've come to the point to say, hey, I own my truths, I know my narrative, good or bad, that's part of my story now. It's hard for someone to change that. We do have, as George mentioned earlier, free therapy that the Southwest Community Center is providing now. So that's whether it's child therapy, individual therapy, family therapy, couples therapy. These are clinicians of color providing clinicians to Black and Brown communities. There's Zoom sessions. You can go in and do the sessions in person. And there's also a collaboration with Syracuse University where you could get therapy through the Couple and Family Therapy Center as well too. So I'm going to provide that number. It's 315-671-5838. And again, that's 315-671-5838.
All right, I'm going to go around the horn. We got 10 seconds. Give me some pearl of wisdom. Let me go with you, Brad. 10 seconds. Go.
Let's see. I would say if you are addressing or trying to address your mental health, I would use my back method for mental health, which is believe, address, and seek counseling or a coach. So first thing is believe that you actually can get better from where you're currently at. The second thing is address the actual issue at hand, meaning have that uncomfortable conversation with that person that you need to have it with. And the last thing is seek counseling or a coach to help you get through that situation.
Dr. Jackson.
I'm going to reiterate something I said. It's a big quote for me. Awareness brings the opportunity for change. You can't change something that you're not aware of, right? Through these conversations, through these talks that we've had today, I hope you're aware of how these things can also influence and impact you, right? But awareness itself doesn't bring change about. It's intentionality, it's action, it's taking that step. And I think everyone is capable of doing that today.
Adrian Hargrove, go. 10 seconds.
Well, piggyback on Dr. Jackson, be aware of it, believe that you can change, and communicate with somebody when you need help.
Appreciate you. And Chris, you have the final say. Go.
I would just say to everybody, man, mental health, take inventory of what's around you, who's around you, and why they're there. we always know that the store owner needs to take inventory of what's selling and what's not. And some stuff on that shelf is toxic and it needs to be removed. So if you want to clean up your headspace, figure out what's around you that's giving you toxic vibes.
Dr. That was Chris Marvel, Dr. Lawrence Jackson, Dr. Brandon Holly, Adrian Hargrove, and of course, Brad Butler II. Thank you so much for a tremendous conversation. Of course, keynote speaker, Dr. Lawrence Jackson. We want to thank our incredible My Brothers Keepers Fellows, Omar Hussein and Abdullahi Sherwar. Thank you to Joe Horan of the Syracuse City School District and the Building Men Program and the My Brothers Keepers Program. One more little thing I got for you. I know we're just about a minute over, but I want you to get this book of dares. This is 100 ways for boys to be kind, bold, and brave. 100 ways for boys to be kind, bold, and brave by Ted Bunch and Anne-Marie Johnson Teague. And it's got little things that you can do. I highly recommend that. Again, thank you to My Brother's Keeper. This program was produced by George Kilpatrick Media and Marketing, and ElectroQ and IntelliQ Productions. I remind you that resources are available here in our community or in your community, wherever you're seeing this video. I'm George Kilpatrick, and I want you to answer this question. Are you my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, I am. Have a good night.